Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, continuing to take a look at some of our favorite transfer portal classes as we head into 2023. And we are taking a look at our Michigan Wolverines, who really sneaky had a good transfer portal class in the sense that they brought in 8 guys who are quality players, 6 of those who I think are going to start or at least play significant reps for this team in 2023. But it may not be sexy on paper, but the guys that they kept out of the portal might be the best part of the transfer portal for Michigan. Now, before we get into it again, just want to say thank you to you guys. Just the support, especially from the Michigan fans, truly does mean a lot. If you guys know us, if you guys have been long-term listeners, you know we rock with the Michigan Wolverines. There's not many things on this planet I enjoy more than talking Michigan football. So if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. I can't thank you guys enough for all the support you guys have shown us. Dill, without further ado, let's get into this Michigan transfer class.
And you mentioned it. It is about keeping guys in the system. And you look up front, they bring in 3-4 offensive linemen who are going to be very competitive in terms of taking reps, older guys from Stanford and obviously Henderson from Arizona State. But you keep guys like Giovanni El-Hadi, Raheem Anderson, Greg Crippen in the program, guys who are going to be really good players, we think. And Giovanni El-Hadi's already shown, I think, a lot of promise. And he's a guy who he'll go start on probably every other Big Ten, maybe with the exception of Ohio State and Penn State.
That's where I want to start with. Like the biggest thing is these guys, like especially a guy like Giovanni El-Hadi, you got if you've been listening to us, you know how high we are on this cat. There's probably 10 teams across the country where he's not starting on. And he decides to stay with Michigan going into his third year. What does that tell you about this culture, this team? Is that this team is very tight. If you commit to Jim, you are a guy that's going to ride it out. Guys like Mike Bear, who have been in the system for a long time, don't leave after not starting after their 4th year. It's truly a locker room that is one of the tightest in the country. You look at who they lost in the transfer portal, like it makes sense for those guys to leave, but not massive losses, Dill. And now as we
even look across, it's like everywhere in the secondary, guys who, again, you got Makari Page and Rod Moore have locked up those safety spots, we think, for possibly 2 more years. And you got guys like Keon Sabb, ultra talented, Zeke Berry, very talented, guys who are willing to stay in this program. And you look across the country, there's a lot of really good freshmen leaving colleges after 1 year because they don't think they're going to play as sophomores. And Michigan's doing, again, what they need to do, because at the end of the day, what's made Michigan so good these past 2 years is that they're developing guys from freshman year to senior year, and you're seeing monster jumps in them taking steps to becoming NFL players. And that is probably what's encouraging, is that Michigan's not seeing that turnover, which, again, would be debilitating in a sense to the whole operation, which is centered around development.
Yeah, that is. I mean, you take a look at, obviously we have a lot to thank for Jim Harbaugh and what he's done, but the guy that's kind of the unsung hero of this team and their success is Ben Herbert, the strengthening and conditioning coach. Like these guys come in. It's not like Michigan was landing top 5, top 3 classes. They've been a top 5, top 3 team the last 2 years. I think a lot of that has to do with what Ben Herbert's done in the strength room, getting these guys ready to play high quality football. And I think a lot of these guys like Giovanni El-Hadi, Keon Sabb, Raheem Anderson, the guys you mentioned are just kind of trusting the process. So without that kind of being said, like Michigan doing a phenomenal job keeping a lot of this young talent in the program, getting developed. Let's talk about the new faces, Dill. I want to start on the offensive line because this is where Michigan's team starts. I mean, this is all the Michigan fans that have watched football or watched this Michigan team the last 2 years, that's where it starts. You bring in 3 guys who I think are going to be starters for this team, and 3 guys who have played a lot of football coming from the Pac-12. Miles Hinton coming from Stanford, Ladarius Henderson coming from Arizona State, and Drake Nugent coming from Stanford. It's hard to get starting tackles in the transfer portal. It's a lot harder to get 2 starting tackles in the transfer portal, and Michigan did that.
And obviously they lose, or not lose 2 tackles, but they're going to lose Ryan Hayes at left and the pros. And again, right tackle is a spot I think that could have been improved. So whether Carson Barnhart or Trente Jones talk about keeping guys in the system, or it's going to be Miles Hinton, I just think you're going to have a much more competitive situation at the one position that maybe you could say wasn't quite up to par in terms of what the rest of the line was, because it was really good. And obviously you're returning the 2 leaders in Keegan and Zinner. Talk about recruiting guys, keeping them out of the NFL. again, these type of wins, like Michigan's going to have a old, experienced offensive line that's really tough, really physical. And that's pretty much been what Michigan's relied on for the past 2 years now.
Drake Nugent screams another Olu to me. Like a guy that's just like maybe not the physical traits to be like a top 50 pick in the NFL. Drake Nugent was kicking around the idea of going to the NFL. I actually listened to a podcast that he was on. He said, I came to Michigan because I wanted to be around greatness. I wanted to compete for a national championship. Very similar reasons Olu came to Michigan coming from Virginia. Like two guys that maybe got day 3 grades in the NFL draft and said, I'm going to go play one more year, compete for a national title. Drake Nugent and Olu kind of very similar career paths.
Smart, rock solid, dependable guys. Like that's exactly what I think of when I think of those two players, and that's essentially all you want in a center.
And Dill, the last guy on the offense side of the ball I want to talk about, AJ Barner. And again, it's like this is Colston Loveland's tight end one spot, no doubt about it. But Michigan plays with that 12 personnel. You're going to see a lot of 2 tight end sets. AJ Barner was one of the best tight ends in the Big Ten last year. Unfortunately, played on a horrible Indiana team. Dill, I mean, you're looking at a Michigan team that uses their tight ends as difference makers and playmakers. They ask them to do a lot of things. You have 2 of the best tight ends in the Big Ten, if not in the country.
In 2 versatile tight ends,
yes.
Both big physical tight ends. Again, that's Michigan plays with their tight ends in line. They're not like hybrid wide receivers at all. And so you got 2 guys, and obviously Loveland we know can do that. Was a star last year and really came on late. And you look at AJ Barner, a very similar kind of game, a bigger physical tight end. And honestly, the one thing I really hope you get more out of is just use these tight ends in the red zone, score some touchdowns. Because if there's one thing you can quibble with Michigan, and obviously reared its ugly head big time in the playoff game against TCU, is it's not punching the ball in the red zone. And that, again, if Michigan's gonna, that just can't be the case again. It was so frustrating last year. It was, and again, we've heard the stories. Maybe Matt Weiss was the one calling plays in the red zone. Maybe now it'll be shown more.
I said that last time. I'm very interested to know if that's actually the truth. If any listener, if y'all know about that story, can y'all let us know in the comment section if that's true? I saw like rumors about it. I'm not totally sure if it's true. But again, adding 2 tight ends, it's going to help there. And we don't have Jake Moody anymore. Like, there's no money man Moody. I'm not saying the kicking will be bad, but I don't want to be kicking 4 or 5 field goals a game.
If we had Moody, I wouldn't want to kick the field. We kick so many field goals.
Yeah, you can't. It's really hard to win college football games. You need to score touchdowns, and Michigan's going to do that, hopefully at a better clip with 2 tight ends who are legitimate all Big Ten type of guys. On the defensive side of the ball, you land 2 really interesting kids. And I want to start with Josiah Stewart, who it's hard to find more productive pass rushers than Josiah Stewart. He looked like a monster in the spring game. Dill, this was, I think, our biggest hole on our defense last year. Like, you look at Michigan's team, and it wasn't even that big of a hole. This was a very good defense. But when it mattered, and you were going up against some of the better offenses in the country, our pass rush left a little bit to be desired. And a guy like Josiah Stewart, who's at 20-plus sacks in his first 2 years at Coastal Carolina, I think will certainly help that out.
And he came in, ripped it up in the spring game. Yeah. And that's what me with you is like, this was the land they needed. And because top to bottom defense, it's going to be really good. The defensive tackle is really good, really young. Another guy to keep out of the portal, Rayshon Benny, a guy I think could start at a lot of football teams. Is probably going to be a depth guy, but a super important depth guy for what Michigan does. And now you do have that number 1 pass rusher to kind of go around some guys, and you keep hearing it. Braden McGregor is a guy you kind of want to see come on and kind of have a Hutchinson breakout year. Obviously, we'll be rooting for that. And Jalen Harrell are just a really solid player. Probably will never be that top end pass rusher, but really good in the run.
But a super unsung hero. Like he's been so solid for Michigan over the last couple of years that no one just wants to talk about. But I'm with you. Like you have a bunch of guys that you feel good about. I don't think you had a guy you felt great about. Josiah Stewart might be a guy you feel great about coming off the edge. And I know this isn't a transfer portal guy, but if we're talking Michigan ball, I do want to shout out Derek Moore. He's like my dark horse to break out. I think coming out of St. Francis Academy 2 years ago, like he's going to be a stud. I really do think. And Dill, at that linebacker spot, that wasn't even that big of a need. Like we kind of play with that nickel. We only play with 2 linebackers. You go get a young kid in Ernest Hausman who took the world by storm as a true freshman at Nebraska. 24/7 Sports has him as the number 2 guy in the transfer portal, only next to Travis Hunter. Massive gap for Michigan.
And especially given that he's young and he'll be – because Junior Colson's going to the draft this year. If you ask me, I think he's going first round. Now we're going to have 2 stars in the middle, and then it'll be Ernest Housen's show probably next year, and I hope he plays good enough to go to the league too as a junior. But again, it's just adding to that pipeline and having a guy behind Colson, because he's going to leave a monster void. I mean, he's been the guy for 2 years now in the middle in terms of, I know Josh Ross was great, but Colson, he's been, in my opinion, the heart and soul of the defense, especially stopping the run, playing sideline to sideline. So Hausman, a guy to pair with him now, which is very exciting, but also to kind of lead this team into the future. I think that to me is
and this is like no knock at a guy like Mikey Barrett, who's just been so solid. Legitimately one of my favorite Michigan Wolverines on this roster. Culture guy. I don't know if he's like an NFL caliber linebacker. You go back to when Michigan had some stud linebackers like a guy like Devin Bush. Like Junior Colson and Ernest Hausman have that level of play to them. And so it's like, you remember how impactful Devin Bush was for this Michigan defense when he was playing at Michigan? And then when you lose him, how much we struggled at that linebacker spot. I think you have 2 guys in Ernest Hausman and Junior Colson who are that level caliber of athlete and have that level of play to them, who can go sideline to sideline, have that speed that a guy like Ross, a guy like Mikey Barrett might not have. There's not many better linebacker duos in my mind in the country.
No better linebacker duos, if you ask me.
And so, like, kind of wrapping up this transfer portal grade, it's like on paper they brought in 8 transfers. I really do think, I mean, you have a kicker too, who might be our starting kicker. Jack Tuttle's probably the only guy that I don't think will play. I knock on wood, won't play significant snaps for Michigan because JJ McCarthy's the guy. But you brought in 6 guys at some very important positions, at the tackle position, at the pass rusher position, that are massive.
The one thing about Jack Tuttle, though, a possible red zone running attack. I mean, you saw they wanted to run him hard in the spring game, a little bigger than JJ.
Yeah, okay, I
something there.
I see where you're coming from. I'm not taking JJ McCarthy off the field. I said that's a hard sell for me to take JJ McCarthy off the field in any circumstance. I would almost get Alex Orji in there as our runner if we're doing a little like wildcat runner. Like, give me the Cam Newton body of Alex Orji running that football. But still, like, on paper, like, a lot of teams will be, oh yeah, they did all right in the transfer portal, brought in 8 guys, some solid dudes. Massive for what Michigan did to keep some of these guys out of the transfer portal. It's just maybe a Michigan homer here. I'm giving them a solid A on the report card for the transfer portal grade. I'm not giving them anything other than that. Again, wanted to keep this one quick, but did kind of just want to talk about what Michigan did in the transfer portal, and even more just highlight the culture that's being built in Michigan, and just not guys like all across the country. Guys are leaving, not in Ann Arbor. They're staying to go win a national championship. Again, appreciate you guys checking us out. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.